So to recap really quick, the who is Jesus, his disciples, and a small child. And where they're in Capernaum, so that's a town around the Sea of Galilee. It's where Jesus did a lot of his ministry, way up north, far north, way north of Jerusalem. So considered the backwoods. When this is towards the end of Jesus' ministry, he's going to be making his way towards Jerusalem to be crucified. Maybe just a few months out. So he's getting towards the end of his ministry. And if you're just thinking about it in terms of the book of Matthew, really we're just a few chapters away of when he enters into Jerusalem. So we're getting closer to the end of his ministry, which should tell us something about roughly, the disciples have been with him for a long time. They've heard his teaching. And yet these are the things that he's still having to reiterate to his disciples, which is interesting. And then we started getting into the text of what are we talking about here? And so we started summarizing the text like we were talking about. We're making observations of the text, and then we're trying to summarize it in the past tense so that way we can understand what it meant to his disciples at the time. And then once we have that, then we can move it into application, which would be present tense. Make it present for us as his disciples, and then the application would be to do something about that. So that would make it from an indicative statement. Let's say Jesus taught his disciples about who's the greatest in the kingdom. So that would be in the past tense. We can understand who's the greatest in the kingdom. That'd be making it present tense. And then you have to humble yourself in order to be great in the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven. That would be an application. You have to do something with the text. So we got down to verse 10. So remember, he gets asked, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And then he brings a small child in there, and he says, unless you humble yourself like this little child, that's what you have to do in order to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And he starts talking about offenses, and woe unto the person by whom the offense comes. And you should take drastic measures, or Jesus is teaching his disciples that drastic measures are needed in order to deal with offenses, and then not despising is the next thing that came up. So we were going to summarize verses 10 through 14, which includes a little parable, which is pretty common in Jesus' teaching. The parable is like a short little story that has a spiritual point to it. And so we'll read verses 10 through 14 and try and summarize it. So take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. For the Son of Man is come to save that which is lost, or which was lost. How think ye, or what do you think of this? If a man have 100 sheep, and one of them be gone astray, doth he not leave the 99 and goeth into the mountains, and seeketh that which is gone astray? And if so be that he findeth it, verily I say unto you, he rejoiceth more of that sheep than of the 99 which went not astray. Even so, it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Now I have perish in blue because this word for lost, apolumi, is the same as perish, apolumi. If you can, it's really small. The Greek is tiny down there, but if I right click it, maybe it'll make it a little bigger. Oh, come on. Whoa. That was a little unexpected. Nope, that's not what I wanted. All right, so I should be able to right-click this here. And so that should be big, at least a little bit bigger. Yeah, apolumi, which probably looks like Greek to you, but it looks like Greek to everyone. Ha ha ha. All right. That was a dad joke. That was a dad joke. All right, so if we were going to summarize those verses, 10 through 14, how would you put that in the past tense to summarize it, to get kind of the main idea of what he's talking about there?
As in the greatest, who's the greatest in the kingdom?
No, so the verses that we just read, verses 10 through 14, just this section. So take heed that you despise not, all the way through. It's not God's will, it's not the Father's will that any of the little ones should perish.
Could you repeat the question?
How would you summarize verses 10 through 14 in the past tense? Like, that's the hard part, right? The way that we were putting in the past tense last week was Jesus taught, and then the summary. Now remember, when you summarize it, you're inherently going to lose a lot of the details. But what you're trying to do is get the kernel of what's in this section, what's in this paragraph. And then we can take that and compare it to the other sections, because paragraphs are units of thought. But this is a big section that's talking about a theme that has units of thought. And we're just trying to break it down to understand the flow of thought that Jesus has as he's teaching his disciples. And this one's tough because there's a story, there's a couple of principles that are general. Here's one that I came up with. And I came up with 3 different ways to summarize it. So, Jesus taught that his mission was to seek and to save the ones who have been deceived and thereby cause offenses.
Going back to the previous.
So, right, I included something in the previous section within this summary, so I'm trying to connect the thought. It's like, why is he telling this parable here after he said what he just said? How does this connect? Where's he going with this?
I think it's important to note that verse 11 is taken out of every other Bible translation.
Verse
Well,
11.
not every, but most Bible translations.
For the Son of Man is to
The Son of
come.
Man is come to save that which was lost.
Hmm.
So that may be something that's extremely important to this section,
Okay.
because if it's taken out of other translations,
Yeah. So that's going to get into the topic of textual criticism and all of that, which we're going to put that completely aside. We're looking at this. Here's another way, perhaps. Jesus taught his disciples against thinking a fellow disciple is worthless by illustrating the value of a person by comparing them to a shepherd's attitude towards his sheep. That was a lot of words, right? But so he tells this parable about a shepherd and sheep, and because he starts with, don't despise the little ones, there's the beginning thought. And he goes, well, let me tell you a story of, or illustrating someone who doesn't despise something. And there's 100 sheep, one of them goes astray, is lost. He doesn't go, oh, well, I still got 99. That's not his attitude. His attitude is, no, that one is super important. I'm not going to despise that one.
Jesus was very concerned about those who had left the fold, and he wanted to go get them.
Yeah, it's right there in verse 11, right? Yeah, for the Son of Man has come to save that which is lost. Yeah. So, I'll give my last, or wait, did I do 4? I did 4. Okay, I did 4. Here's a third one. Jesus taught that pride leads to thinking others are worthless, and contrasts that with a parable of a shepherd and a sheep. So notice, the word pride doesn't show up anywhere in this whole passage that we've gone through so far. But the idea, it's the it's the antithesis of humility. And someone who is proud will despise others. So if he has to command his disciples, don't despise one of these little ones. It's kind of like whenever you hear preaching on Ephesians 5 in marriage, right? It says, husbands, love your wives. It's like, why is that commanded? Because we need to hear it.
Because women tend to love their husbands, and men tend to not go that direction.
Right. It's not the natural tendency, right? Yeah. So the natural tendency is like flipped, right? Yeah. So men, you got to be commanded to love your wives, right? But yeah. Anyway, so it's like it's commanded because they needed to hear it, which is interesting. But if you go back to the beginning, they're asking about who's the greatest, and it's like, oh, that's pride within your heart, and we need to deal with that. So that's where I came up with pride. Even though pride doesn't show up in the text, it's there by contrast in the background. So that's why I summarized it that way. All right, the last one that I came up with, Jesus warned his disciples against thinking those that have gone astray are worthless, because God's not willing that any should perish. And that's where like this idea of, I tried to tie in the word lost with perish, because they're both the same word, and he's trying to bring that together with the idea of not despising. So that's how I summarized it and tried to break it down to its, to what I think he's trying to get there. So then the next section is very familiar section. We have 15 through 20. We'll read that real quick. Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. And if he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee one or two more, that in the mouth of two or three witnesses every word may be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as a heathen man and a publican. Verily I say unto you, whatsoever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. And again I say unto you, that if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. For where two or three are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. So the whole reason we started looking at this was because of that last verse, and because that gets ripped out of context many times. But there's a lot of stuff right here at the end of this little section that's like, what's going on here? Like, what is whatsoever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. And then, if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them, my Father which is in heaven. It's like, whoa, that seems like a blanket statement. Is it really? Is it anything? And then you get the two or three are gathered in my name. So I would summarize this section as Jesus taught his disciples the steps of handling offenses and reconciliation. And again, that kind of ties back into a couple of paragraphs previous where he's talking about offense. And he's talking about like, woe unto you if, it's necessary that offenses will come, but woe unto the person by whom the offense comes. And so now he's like, all right, what do you actually do with these offenses? When someone trespasses against you. So this isn't just like necessarily like, oh, my feelings are hurt. It's, no. This person, they sinned against you. It's the most general and common word for sin in the New Testament. So it is clearly a sin. It's against what God would want us to do. and someone sins against you. And it's if your brother shall trespass against you, what do? Well, you go and tell him his fault. And this is like you're telling them, right, to state that someone has done wrong with the implication that there's adequate proof. It's not hearsay, it's not just like I'm making something up. It's no, this is sin. You totally did it. I'm confronting you about it. We have to deal with this. Like it needs to stop. You do that alone, and if he hears you, and the idea there, again, is to believe something and respond to it as having heard. It's to accept the rebuke or the reproof. So if they accept it, you've gained your brother. You've like, oh, I'm sorry I sinned against you. Let's continue on. Let's be reconciled. Then there's 2 or 3 witnesses. Because, referring back to the law, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word may be established. It's not just, you've probably had this experience where you feel like you've been violated in some way, you've been wronged, but you're kind of going, is it just me? Or did something bad happen here? Or am I just taking this personally? Like, it seems like everybody else gets along with this person, but I'm like really struggling with this. And it's like that's where other people outside the situation, if they see the truth of it and they agree, 2 or 3 witnesses are helpful. It's like, no. You don't need to be thinking that you're just taking it personally. It's, no. This is bad, this is sin, and it needs to be dealt with. And he still neglects to hear that. Then you tell it to the church. Tell it to the church. Oh, and then this is where I interpreted that, but we're going to skip that because I'm not going to talk about my own interpretation yet. And then if he rejects what the church has to say, then let him be unto thee as a heathen man and a publican. All right, so then we get the binding and loosing. All right, so I said we go back to Matthew 16 because that's where this binding and loosing stuff first gets mentioned in the book of Matthew. So if you go back a couple of chapters, and this is where, oh man, it gets interesting. We need to go to verse 13. All right, so we're in a new passage. It's still within the book of Matthew, but we're in a different time, a different place, maybe a different audience. So real quick, where are we? Caesarea Philippi. That becomes important. And he asked his disciples. So now we're talking about Jesus and his disciples. So that's the who. And he asked them a question. And then let's see. So we got who, where, when. Well, it's before what we were just looking at. So at least relative chronology. And now we're going to get into what. All right. So he's at Caesarea Philippi. Now this is where if you're gonna study this out, there's some interesting stuff about Caesarea Philippi, about where he's at when he's asking this question. And I believe, oh wait, let's see. Did I? No. Oh, I got rid of it. Okay. Well, let me do this. All right. Where am I going? I want. I feel the pressure. Oh no. What am I trying to do? I don't know either. Now I'm, okay. I want Where's the Bible? No. Not that. Oh, come on. I want this. Passage guide. Okay. All right, so this is a Faith Life Study Bible. So this is just study notes. I'll blow this up for you so you can read it. All right, Caesarea Philippi, a city about 25 miles north of the Sea of Galilee, at the base of Mount Hermon and near the source of the River Jordan. Caesarea Philippi sat at the uppermost region of the Old Testament Bashan, which was considered in the ancient Near East to be the gateway to the underworld. Interesting. In New Testament times, a cult center for the worship of Pan was carved into mountain rocks there, as well as a temple dedicated to Zeus, the chief god of the Greco-Roman pantheon. So, at that place, he's at the base of Mount Hermon, which is considered the gateway to the underworld. So here's Jesus at the gateway of the underworld, asking a question of his disciples. What's the question? Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And they said, some say you are John the Baptist, and some Elias or Elijah, and others Jeremiah. Jeremiah is the Greek rendering of Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. So it's like, all right, you're a powerful, who's John the Baptist? If you're studying this out, you'd want to do a little study on John the Baptist, Elijah. If you didn't know who Elijah was and the ministry that he had in the Old Testament, you'd want to go read about Elijah and what the miracles that he did, and the kind of preaching that he did. What's the one story that immediately comes to mind when I say Elijah? That's right, fire from heaven, right? Mount Carmel, the showdown, Sunday. That's exactly right. That's what it is. It's like, all right, prophets of Baal, let's do this. And it's epic, and it's awesome, and it's like, why would people think that Jesus is Elijah? Because he's doing miracles. Yeah, he's doing miracles. Jeremiah. What do you know about Jeremiah?
It's called the Weeping Prophet.
The weeping prophet. Did people believe Jeremiah? Nobody believed Jeremiah, especially the authorities. You see a parallel between Jeremiah and Jesus, and why people might think that, oh, this is Jeremiah. Or one of the prophets, which the prophets have, they are the testimony of God against the people or against the authorities, or, that's what the prophets do. So that's what people are saying. Jesus has this ministry, he's doing things, and there's lots of different opinions about who Jesus is. So then he goes, okay, you've told me what other people say, but now I'm going to focus down. All right, disciples, it's just me and you. Whom say ye that I am? What do you guys think? And this is the difference between knowing the theoretical answer to a question and then actually believing it and applying it to yourself, right? But whom say ye that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Whoa. Bing, 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 bing. Lights are flashing. Good answer, Simon Peter. Good answer. And Jesus answered and said unto him, and this is where it gets interesting, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, For flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. So this has been revealed to you by God. This is not something you just picked up. It's not by flesh and blood. And I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. That's why it's important to know about Caesarea Philippi. Because he's standing right there at the gates of hell, or the gates of the underworld, or, shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then he charged he his disciples that they should tell no man that he was Jesus the Christ. Got to keep reading because this is just amazing. From that time forth began Jesus to show unto his disciples that he must go unto Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and be raised again the third day. This is when he starts telling them about the resurrection. He had not told them that before this. It's only after what Peter said. You are the Son of God. You are the Christ, the Messiah, the anointed one that was promised to come. It's you. And he goes, okay, don't tell anybody else, but this is what's really going to happen. I'm going to go and suffer many things. I'm going to be killed and then raised on the third day. Then Peter took him, which is so interesting. I wonder what that word is. Let's click on that, and then we'll go here. Yeah, to take or to lead off to oneself. So it's like he took him aside. So he took him away from the other disciples and was like, whoa, 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 Jesus, come here. Come here. We got to have a little powwow, Jesus. And he began to rebuke him. Interesting. Saying, be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee. So, he just, oh man, it just blows my mind. Jesus, he just declared that he's the Son of God. And then God tells him what his will is. And then Jesus says, no, that. And or Peter, yeah, not John. Peter tells him, no, be it far from thee. Don't do God's will. But he turned and said unto Peter, get thee behind me, Satan. Thou art an offense unto me. For thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. And I wanted to read all the way down to there because of this word right here. Does that connect to what we just read in Matthew 18? How did Jesus handle someone who's going against the declared will of God? He just threw it right in his face. Right? Peter's saying, no. You're not going to die. You're not going to be resurrected. No, none of that. And Jesus goes, no, you are an offense. Whoa. And it's the same. Yeah.
I almost wanted the time frame between, you get the keys to heaven, and then get it behind you, Satan. Was it the same day? Was it a couple days? Because what juxtaposition between the two of
I think this
is a great thing. Woo, God has blessed you.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I guess you could take this from that time forth. Right, so beginning then and moving forward, this is what he started telling them. Now I am interpreting that as, okay, he immediately told them that. So Peter said, you're the Christ, Son of the living God. He goes, you got it. You got it from heaven. You got it from my Father. That wasn't from man. Cool. Now let me tell you the next part of the plan. And then immediately, Just like,
What an emotional.
let's, yeah, like, right? But that might not necessarily be the case, because this is a relative chronology. But at some point, it could be immediately, or it could be a little bit after that. Peter took him aside and was like, "Hey, we need to talk about this. Like, pause, pump the brakes." All right, so here is the first thing. So first, keys of the kingdom of heaven. Oh wow! Yeah, I gotta put my whole body into that.
Tired now?
All right, so we have keys to. So that's the first thing. Keys to the kingdom of heaven. That's what it says, right? Yeah. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be. Yeah. And then we have binding and loosing. We also have gates of hell. All right, so those things are the things that are here in this text. But what we notice is in Matthew 18, it also mentions binding and loosing. Now, these are two different contexts, but we need to be able to discern what's here in order to compare it to what happens in Matthew 18. And what we notice here is that it's very individual. So, because Jesus is talking directly to Peter, and he says, "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So, we also get the first mention of church in here, and the only other mention in the whole book of Matthew is in Matthew 18. Those are the only two times that church is mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew. Let's see. So we see. So we have Peter, we have the keys, and we have the gates of hell. So the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church, because it is referring back to church. So Jesus is going to build his church. I guess, what have you guys heard about that statement right there? "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church."
Yeah, Peter's the rock.
Peter's the rock. Okay.
He was like the
First pope. Okay, so that's a Catholic interpretation that this is the passage that they go to justify the teaching of Peter being the first pope. Jesus is giving him the keys to the kingdom of heaven. So first, keys to the kingdom of heaven. What is that like? What is that referring to? Well, if you got a study Bible, there's usually these. It might have some cross references. At least in this, these are the cross references that get pulled up in this one that I have. So we have Isaiah 22:22. "And the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulders." That's interesting. How do you lay a key on someone's shoulders? So keys, is this a literal physical key? Like, did Jesus have keys in his hands and he goes, "Here, Peter, here are the keys. Jingle, jingle, jingle." No. So the keys of the kingdom of heaven is a metaphor. So it's literally a metaphor, but for what? What do keys do?
Give you access.
Access. Okay.
They admit you.
Authority. So that's right. And the key of the house of David I will lay upon his shoulders. There's an authority. Okay. These are all A words, man. Are you guys preachers? Like, all right.
We're gonna get to my last point, and then I'll be done.
Yeah, your last point. 30 minutes later. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so these are the ideas that are swirling around this idea of keys. Okay? Because look at the rest of Isaiah 22:22. So he shall open, and none shall shut, and he shall shut, and none shall open. Does that sound similar to whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and what shall loose on earth be loosed in heaven? A little bit, right? And then Revelation 3:7. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things saith he that is holy, he that is true, and he that hath the key of David that openeth. And so that's a direct reference back to Isaiah 22:22. So and Jesus is the person that has the key of David that opens and doesn't, he opens things and you can't shut it. If he shuts it, you can't open it because he's got the authority to open and shut those things. Revelation 1:18. I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive evermore. Amen. And have the keys of hell and of death. Okay, so now Jesus is the one that has the keys, has the authority over hell and death. Again, Revelation in chapter 9, verse 1. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the keys of the bottomless pit. So, okay, well, what's this bottomless pit thing? Revelation 20, verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. Actually, let's jump forward there.
That sounds more literal.
And a great chain. But also, Revelation is what? It's apocalyptic literature, and John says that he's in a vision seeing these things. Okay? So having a key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand, he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and, there's that word, bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him that he should not deceive that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. So now we have, in a different context in Revelation, we have the idea of keys and binding. And it's about the devil. And if we... 16. So we have the idea of authority, binding, and spiritual warfare. Because Jesus is at the gates of hell, and he's saying that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. And so how do you guys picture that? The gates of hell shall not prevail against the church. Do you guys see that as the church is this little boat, and it's just like floating, and there's this giant warship, and the gates of hell are trying to, but it's not going to win? Or how do you picture the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church?
What comes to mind for me is during the Exodus, the house of Korah
The swallowing up.
swallowed the gates of hell.
Swallowed up Korah, yeah. So the idea is that the church is going to advance, and the gates of hell can't prevent it, can't stop it. It's very hopeful. It's
Go back to the seal also, when he seals the bottomless pit of Satan. One day he's going to put a seal on his church that nothing can find it.
The seal of
Okay.
the church happens first.
Yes, and this, oh man, the ceiling is like, there's like 3 different directions that my mind just went into. I know, because it's 10:45. So, all right, so what I want, at least for now, what I want us to notice is that these three ideas are all present in Matthew 16, and so understanding binding and loosing needs to incorporate what he's talking about, and I think spiritual warfare is what's being talked about here. And what kind of access, admittance, this binding and loosing, what kind of authority is Jesus giving to Peter here? And then, because I have a couple of verses that we'll look at next week, which are in this right here. These are other places. I did a word study where this word binding is used, and it's right here. So here's the word. Here are the different ways it's translated, and all the different, like, it's translated these ways, and then like how often it's translated that way. And then you can look at the different senses. So to bind, to tie things together, or to become secure, confined, or restrained, or to be obligated. And I looked at other places where binding, those words binding and loosing are used, but also some of those places only the word bound is used, and other places both of them are used. It's like, maybe that tells us something about what this binding and loosing is. And we'll look at that list of verses, just so we can get an idea of what binding and loosing is in Matthew 16. Once we understand that, then we can go back to Matthew 18 and see how those two things compare, and then we can think about what that means for us. Woo! Studying words and stuff. Excellent. All right, let's pray. Let's go. Our Father in heaven, thank you so much for a beautiful day. Again, thank you for your word. Lord, thank you that it all holds together, and Lord, that you've given us something powerful, something that can change our lives. Lord, help us to understand it. Help us to learn from it and be able to apply it to our lives. I know we're going really slow and just looking at things very slowly, but Lord, I hope it's a blessing to your people, and I hope that everybody's encouraged by it. Lord, be with us now as we go upstairs to worship you. Help us to sing praises to your name, and that you would be honored and glorified in it. In Jesus' name, amen.